Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and welcome to Mondays with Mr. Happy, aka Mr. Happy Mondays, the weekly Q&A show where you ask me questions and I answer them. It's been a real gamer week for me, to be honest. That's why there hasn't been that many videos, even though I've actually done quite a bit of work on quite a few separate projects that are like 25 to 50% done. I got a little bit more work done on the verses. I didn't forget that this week. I did some Final Fantasy VII Remake speedruns, just an easy any percent low route, which is a whole different world for me because I'm not used to really doing stuff like that. Also worked on, some opinion pieces on Final Fantasy VII Remake. We're going to be doing a spoiler cast for Final Fantasy VII Remake this week on TBG. We also got confirmation there's going to be a live letter on Friday, which means we'll have a live letter overview on Friday, which means next week's State of the Realm is going to be about the live letter. So we actually have quite a few things that have happened this last week and things that are exciting coming up for the next week. So, but I've just really taken, dude, sometimes with everything that's going on right now, sitting back and just playing some 7 Remake, working on those speedruns, or doing some Animal Crossing has been a godsend for my sanity this last week. So I'm doing surprisingly well given the circumstances that we're all currently under. So I think with that, I think we should just thank our patrons. I guess thank SteelSeries as another reminder. We have that 12% discount code and get started. So yeah, SteelSeries, we made mention of it a few weeks ago. I don't think I made mention of it last week, and I probably will stop making mention of it again soon. We've been sponsored by SteelSeries for a while now. And they recently upgraded my discount code from 10% to 12%. Doesn't seem like that big of an increase, but, any amount of money saved in this current time is great. Just want to thank them for that. I've been with them for like 4 years now. And I know that hearing about a discount code when some people aren't even sure if they're going to be able to work is not really something people want to hear all too much, but figure it's worth at least making a little bit of mention of it. But the big thing we, of course, do for every weekly Q&A is thank our patrons who, despite everything, we actually had a surge of patrons in the last week. And I've done nothing to deserve that. I like to make that perfectly clear. As long as y'all are looking out for yourselves first and foremost, that's what matters to me most. I appreciate all of you who tune in for this every week, and of course those of you whose names are scrolling on the screen as our patrons over there. We should definitely do a little bit more with that, and I say that a lot. I really don't even have any excuses. Sometimes it's literally just having a gamer moment, and shit just takes longer to get done at that point. But thank you to them. Thank you to our patrons of Darkness, Khuja Cross on Jenova and Kurenai Oni. Appreciate both y'all for going above and beyond with your support. And thanks everyone. It's I'm amazed I'm in such a good mood for this episode, because it wasn't like I was in a super spectacular mood before I started. But then I started recording. I was like, I got a lot to be happy about right now. As happy as I'm going to be given the circumstances. So anyway, with that, thank you to all of you. Thank you to SteelSeries, and let's start the Q&A. All right, first question. I want to scroll down. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hello to you too, by the way. No one ever says hello. They just want me for my questions. Well, for my answers. Having leveled up Fisher, now I have the ability to go spear fishing. Why can't fishing be as simple as pick one of 3 lures and simply hope for the best? Like having 3 jigs to pick from for spear fishing. It would be easier with not having to guess. Well, I mean, that's kind of counterintuitive to what they want fishing to be in the first place. Most of the time, fishing is a little bit more complicated than that in MMORPGs. And they definitely want a more depth of knowledge, because fishing really is a lot more about the pursuit of catching a bigger fish or a rarer fish than it is about functionality in the rest of the game. It's had plenty of functionality in the past between ethereal reduction and fishing recipes, but I feel like that it's counterintuitive to their design points. So that's probably why you'll never see it be as simple as that. It also take a lot of rewriting of what is actually required of fishing, the number of items that would be removed in the process. So that's the most likely reason why. And I don't really have much else to say because I don't do a whole lot of fishing. Another short one. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hi, Mr. Happy. Hello. If you were sent back in time as a fresh level 80, what things would you do and in what order? I don't think I would change anything. Like, I leveled my trusts by leveling a few jobs. Maybe change the order of the jobs I level. But I mean, okay. No, yeah, I can't really think of anything. The only thing I would maybe have done is, like, leveled only the crafters that I knew for certain I was going to need for materia. But in the end, I would have leveled them all to 80 anyway. So, yeah, I don't think I'd really change anything. I get everything I ever want to get done in this game. I get it done. And then there are some things where I'm, like, on the fence. And most of the time, I maybe take a shot or two at it. And then it's like, whatever. Something like the PvP mounts or whatnot. But, yeah, I mean, I got everything done, realistically, that I wanted to get done. I got all my solos done that I felt were feasible at the current time. Beaten every raid tier, ultimate, blue mage raids. Like I've accomplished everything I've wanted to accomplish so far in Shadowbringers. So no, I don't think there's anything I would change other than knowing that certain items are going to be more expensive and preparing. You know, the send myself a sports almanac equivalent of information for making some gil in that. That's it. That's all I could think of. Another one. A lot of these questions just from the last day. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey, Happy. Appreciate these Q&A sessions. Appreciate you asking questions because can't answer anything without any questions. Really invested in Eureka right now and just want to know if it's worth getting the augmented gear Anonymous or do I just wait for Elemental? So augmented gear doesn't have any sort of benefits to you inside of Eureka. There are a few pieces of gear that exist across the different Eurekas that do have bonuses like haste or elemental bonus, but the Anonymous stuff is strictly for glamour, or if you're looking to do the Unending Coil of Bahamut, the item level 345 stuff in there is still phenomenal for giving you even more of an edge with the pentamelded 345 stuff, since the material will work at that appropriate item level. I'd say the only recommendation I could possibly make when you're going through Eureka early is if you just have a ton of spare gil, buy a Kieran's Osode or a Vermilion Cloak. Or you can buy the items that let you turn it in, but I think you actually need access to Hydatos to do that. Because those actually have elemental bonus on them. And thus, in the earlier portions, especially with the multiplier of the 150% echo, it's way, way more useful in those earlier levels. But the augmented gear, no, you don't need to do that. As for what's the best way to use crystals, honestly, all you really need to do is be upgrading your relics in each individual step. And that's the thing that matters over all else, because you're going to want to do that to get up to the next step and get up to your next relic increase. So crystals, just finish the weapon in Anonymous and then move on to Pagos once you're of the appropriate level, which you will be soon. Ooh, we got a chunky one here. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hello, Mr. Happy. I just want to ask you your thoughts concerning the difficulty curve in both Savage and content in general across the expansions. Before taking a 2-year break, I rated during Stormblood and cleared 05 Savage and 06, albeit with a low parse. Yet due to not being that great of a player, as well as playing on high ping, felt that 07 Savage and beyond would be out of my reach. Returning to 14, I'm curious about rating it now again, but the general difficulty of the game seems to have spiked a lot, with even the mechanics of newer trials, dungeons, and normal raids becoming a lot more complex and involved. Watching tutorials, it looks exponentially more difficult and less forgiving relative to 05 Savage. I'm worried that even the easy Savage fights will be beyond my ability. I'm going to tell you right now, I don't even need to read the rest of it, you're really overthinking it. That's all it comes down to. Stop thinking about how hard they are and what you're capable of or what's within your reach, and focus on how you can improve yourself to make any of these things within your reach. I'll tell you that the general difficulty of the raids has not actually changed. It's pretty much on par as it has been with Creator, albeit there's always some spikes. Sometimes they introduce a fight that is more difficult for one or two particular reasons than the rest, but they're all scaled approximately the same. And other than the very final fight in this most recent raid tier, the other ones have very lenient DPS checks, which means there's a lot of room to learn and experience the fight and progress in the fight. So stop worrying so much about how it's related to your previous experience, or, you know, how you feel this is completely out of your reach. I know people who have played with the same ping as you, who have you know, said that they weren't good players, who have worked their way through all sorts of raids and experiences in this game. You're doubting yourself before you even give yourself a chance to improve. And if you do that, you've already beaten yourself and the raid's already beaten you too. You just need to get in and practice. You're going to deal with people who tell you you're shit. It's gonna happen. Even when people are really good at this game, people tell them that. You know, like the healer who goes into the expert roulette and they're keeping everyone's alive. Nobody's even coming close to dying. They're outputting a ton of DPS, but that one dude sees him DPS and he's like, "You're a healer. You're not supposed to DPS, fucking bad player." Like, that's just how it is. So don't take it to heart and just focus on what you're doing, what the next thing to improve is, like you would for anything else. Nothing's out of your reach. You just need to practice and improve, and that's all there is to it. Don't overthink it. Don't try to create reasons or excuses to why you might not be able to get it done. Just come up with a solution. That's my best advice for you, because the game is not more difficult than it was when you did 05. It's still about the same difficulty, so you're the only one beating yourself here. Another chunky one, hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hi, Haps. Hello. More HQ food for you during these difficult times. Dude, I'm going to need it. I think it just got mandated in my state that you can't leave. You can't be outside without a face mask. And we got to wait for some to get here, and I really want to do some grocery shopping. I've been following social distancing. I've even been bringing, instead of gloves, I just straight up bring disinfectant wipes with me. Like, wrap my hands in disinfectant wipes, and everything I touch, I make sure I'm disinfecting it before I touch it or after I touch it or whatever. So, but I gotta have the mask, so I gotta wait for that. I just watched your video on Savage Raids after completing E8. Congratulations. My question is it really the general consensus tanks do not have enough to do this tier? As an off-tank, I felt pretty overwhelmed. We have to kite the bird 4 times and do duty actions twice in E5, bait and switch for hands or Hell and Meteor, multiple times in E6, kite and space out the ads in the ad phase. Yeah, because there's really not a lot in... So there's a few tank-specific things, but there's not really... There's very few things that the tank has to do that is that out of reach. Most of the time, the tanks are just dead brain DPSing. They do a couple of things, and then they're back to dead brain DPSing. The ad in E5 is the one thing I see off-tanks say, like, ugh, I don't want to do that the most. Honestly, the thing that they see the most. But there's no tank swaps in it. There's, outside of kiting the bird and pressing a single button to block the thing, there's not a whole lot going on for tanks. The worst part about that fight is probably keeping uptime as a tank. Because there's a lot of, I mean, even as a melee in general, that fight, it's, you know, you playing on the edge when you're trying to get that done. For the second fight, for E6, yeah, you got to do a couple of tank swaps for that, but that's not really all that bad. That's just a couple of tank swaps. And for one of the tank mechanics, you stand still and throw a ranged G. If anything, that's just frustrating. To stand at the edge of the arena to bait an AoE, and all you can do is shield lob 6 times in the process. Like, E7, there's you block for one another and you rotate ads. Like, the worst part about that's the very beginning is identifying whether it's going clockwise or counterclockwise. After that, like, what else they're doing? And then E8 barely has any tank swaps, you know? There's some silences and some stuns in E8, but the ad phase, can keep in mind, as someone who does range physical, is more than just silences and stuns. I mean, you throw a stun on 2 different mobs as a tank, unless you're a paladin and you do chain stuns. And you throw a silence on 2 different mobs, and if you're the ranged on one side, you take care of that. Yeah, it's a pretty common consensus. There's not a whole lot for tanks to do. And the few things that tanks have to do are very low. They're very low involvement. And I've seen nothing but tanks saying they're bored this patch. And you know what? From an outside perspective looking in, I kind of understand why. Now for somebody, now I will say this, that's for people who are seasoned tanks who've been doing it for years and years and years. I don't know what your overarching experience is. Like, if you just started in Shadowbringers, yeah, actually a lot of that would seem pretty overwhelming. But it's very basic stuff for seasoned tanks, and those are the people who are saying things like that. So I understand why when they say it, and why I would think it as someone who's been around for as long as I am. And this thing about the tank screwing up, acting as a scapegoat for the whole party. No, when everyone screws up in the party finder, everyone gets their fucking fingers pointed at them. When that fucking DPS doesn't collect the orb and eat shit on E5 because they don't have the lightning resistance, they get chewed out for that, not the tank. If the healer, if somebody overlaps during a chain lightning, like runs into somebody and they do it, that blame's going on the healer. If somebody just dies of their own fault, somehow it usually ends up being the healer's fault. But in those situations where, yeah, if the tank doesn't kite the ad properly, and does it wrong over and over again, I mean, if anyone did that, the party finder would rip them. But it's just for tank-specific mechanics, yeah, you're going to notice it more, especially as a tank player. That's without a doubt. I just don't think... I think that the party finder is hilarious, and it should never be taken seriously in regards to what the majority of people say in it. And that, you know, if you screw up a tank mechanic, yeah, but you're going to get called on screwing up a tank mechanic. But if your experience is relatively new to Final Fantasy XIV, it would actually be far more reasonable that you would feel this way about this raid tier, because these would be a lot newer things for you to experience that there wasn't a whole lot of. Last raid tier was... Okay, if people are saying this raid tier is not a lot for tanks to do, last raid tier... Oh boy. Yeah, I mean, I guess Titan had a lot of tank positioning, but, like, a lot of the last raid tier didn't have a lot of tank stuff either. Tanks always say they have the easiest job until the tanks that aren't seasoned tanks say they don't, and then it's a back and forth dialogue like we're having now. Just, that's what the general consensus is, but it's, you know, it doesn't mean you have to feel that way. Bottom line. All right, finally one from like days and days and days ago. Hashtag Mrhappy Mondays. Top of the week to you, sir. I have 2 questions for you related to the relics. Top of the week. I almost said top of the morning to you, I think, as a habit. One, the live letters have made mention the next step of the relics, including an exploration zone that takes what they have learned from Eureka into account. Your opinion, what do you hope this will mean for the zone and its functionality? Honestly, the overall idea of Eureka was okay. It was Pagos. Anemos was plain. Pagos was overboard, and then Pyros and Hydatos, they hit kind of a stride. And I think that's what we'll see. We'll see an experience closer to Pyros and Hydatos. I think that means something like Logos actions being available earlier, such as in the first area. Baldesion Arsenal, they've already made mention of the fact that there won't be competing for portals to get in, so it'll be a much more reliable system to get into the content than what we had prior. I think more micro objectives was a pretty common piece of feedback. People saying that, while yes, the bunnies and the fates are you know, micro objectives in their own right, that there was this lack of ability to kind of go in, get something done quickly, and make a significant amount of progress. So things like daily quests or things like a treasure map equivalent in there were a very, very heavy request. And I think we'll see a lot more bits and pieces in the next exploration zone that make it function both as something you can spam for a long amount of time and make a lot of progress, or something you can jump in and feel like you got something done in a reasonable amount of time that isn't just challenge logs or grabbing a couple of fates. That's what I'm hoping the kind of feedback they grabbed was. And the Logos actions or something equivalent to them being available earlier that would be honestly the biggest thing for me. 2. The relics we received thus far are said to be prototypes of the Blades of Brynhildr. As such, do you think it would make sense for the relics to not visually change their shape since we've already created the form of that blade? Now, I would normally say yes, but I know our boy Geralt is involved, and he doesn't know when to stop. So, these are prototypes, and they don't look precisely like the ones we see in the instance that we do as part of the quest. I think it's reasonable to say that maybe what they are now, they eventually evolve into looking much more like those forms later. But also knowing that they now have a symbol. The Hrothgarians now have a symbol to, or the Hrothgarians, Bajjans, have a symbol to stand behind. If that symbol's not enough to win in battle, they're going to want that weapon to be reforged into its own legend. They're not going to want to just be like, oh, these are the Blades of Brynhildr. They're going to be like, no, these are the modern days of, these are the new blades of Brynhildr. And I wouldn't be surprised if that alone would get the Bajjans to be on board with not just trying to mimic the old ones, but creating something brand new. And I do feel like if they don't suggest it, Geralt will. And, you know, he likes to go a little bit overboard with a lot of these projects. So, I think they'll change pretty significantly over the rest of the expansion. All right, next question. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hi, Happy. How you doing? I'm doing as good as I'm going to do, dude. A little tired, but that's about it. I'm doing all right. You doing all right? I'm doing all right. I was wondering if you ever think that 14 will always pull new expansions from previously established storylines, and once they've gone through all of them, the story will end. Or do you think they could introduce new storylines, characters, places? I mean, they're always introducing new storylines, characters, and places. That never ends. Keep in mind, any previously established storyline is a storyline that at some point was a new story, character, and place. And that all it did was open the door for something further in the future. They literally, as long as they want to keep developing content for this game, it will never end. It's the same as World of Warcraft. If they can write a new story, if they can create content, if people still enjoy it, if it's still popular, if it's still making money, they won't stop making stuff for it. Even Final Fantasy XI, which has been all but abandoned, not entirely, all but abandoned, they still have a skeleton team that can create at least very minor pieces of content that keeps their player base somewhat involved with the game. Final Fantasy XIV, I don't think will come down to a point like that for quite some time. They'd almost have to, again, create another MMO that is the intent of replacing it, like they originally tried with 14 and 11. And I don't think they'll do that. They seem very, very concerned with the preservation of a main numbered Final Fantasy game being received well. It's one of the big reasons why they made sure Final Fantasy XIV came back in the way that it did. They wanted to preserve the mainline Final Fantasy franchise. And so even if they were to come up with a replacement for it, we'd probably get some sort of something else involving Final Fantasy XIV to preserve its name. And so they'll never be done telling this game's story. They'll never be done expanding this game's characters. Even when the game is on its deathbed, they'll find ways to keep growing it, because that's how Square Enix functions as a business and as a creative power in the gaming industry. All right, next one, hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey, man, hope you're doing all right. I'm doing all right. You doing all right? I'm doing all right. I played 14 since 2.5 and quit because I had ping issues and no friends left in the game. Hey, two good enough reasons for me. One is I'm considering coming back. I want to go with a character and enjoy the story. I want to tank, and I've always enjoyed a more support role in multiplayer RPGs, and Warrior might be up my alley. Seeing as you're the natural leader as as you're the natural leader as tank and MMOs, being new to content as well as tanking might not be a great idea. Thoughts? Natural? Oh, natural leader mean like you run ahead and you pull the group. I mean, no, you should play whatever you want. The most important thing in Final Fantasy XIV, everything starts simple, everything has a learning curve, and it's a matter of what you want, what kind of final experience you want by the end of it all. Now, you might have an idea that, you know, maybe doesn't work out for you and you have to try something different. Perfectly reasonable, but that's no reason to shy away from jumping into tank as your first bit. If anything, you know, warrior might be up my alley. That doesn't really sound, that's less of one of the supporty tanks. You know, paladin might be more up your alley as a specific job. But I don't see any issue with you wanting to take the role of a natural leader in an MMO. That might just be the kind of personality you have. I mean, a lot of tanks I know have very similar personality beats because they think like a natural leader. They want to be the first person making the decision, making the contribution, and being the one to direct where things are going. So if that's what your thought is, then don't be worried about whether or not it's the right thing if you're new to content, because your personality probably will let you take to learning that content faster because that's the kind of person you are. That's just my guess, because you immediately went to tank, and that just seems like, I feel like when that's your first thought, it speaks volumes about the person. And two, I've also heard great things about Dancer and would want to try a DPS and a healer too. Do you have any recommendations? Did you enjoy White Mage back in 2.x because of stance dancing, which doesn't exist anymore? Cleric stance doesn't exist. Stance dancing doesn't exist. It still minorly exists from an enmity standpoint on tanks, but even they don't have to go back and forth like they used to back then. Dancer is my main. I love it. It's very simple, very basic, very new player friendly, but has a degree of mastery with how you line everything up with your party and how you work together with your party. For healers, I would actually recommend White Mage. It's my favorite healer right now. It's simple, it's straightforward. It still gets to contribute a substantial amount of DPS. Its healing is very upfront and powerful, but still has some basic heal over times that are incredibly effective. A lot of instant abilities both on the global and off the global cooldown. So White Mage is generally that. After that, I go Scholar. I don't play it as well as I do White Mage, but I do find that the extra responsibility of keeping people alive before they take the damage with all the shielding and whatnot, being incredibly valuable for when I really want to make sure that the party can get through and see the next thing. And I've been playing a lot more of it for that reason as of late. Oh boy, no spaces in this one, huh? Hashtag Mrhappy Mondays. First time comment and ask. Got a couple easy ones for you. You got it. Hello, by the way. Hello. How well do you think the Final Fantasy community would react to an expansion without a clear threat from the get-go? Think Mists of Pandaria before Blizz caved to outcry and spoiled the ending pre-release. Essentially an expansion with a beginning focused on exploration and discovery. I don't think it would be taken to very well. I wasn't taken to Mists starting that way. And it was why after I quit during Cataclysm, where there was a very clear threat right from the get-go, and I saw the trailer, I was like, I thought these were a joke. Like, I thought the existence of these things were a joke, and now they're very, very real. And I don't see anything. Like, it's a cool new area, cool, I don't know. And you know what? The Stormblood trailer gave me some Mists of Pandaria vibes, and it wasn't just because of the more Eastern theme, but other than a couple of random Garlean soldiers, they don't really establish any major threat in the Stormblood trailer, and I kind of got the same feeling, as cool as it was from an aesthetic standpoint, how unthreatening and how not urgent it seems. And I don't think people would take to it very well if we got an expansion that actually met that trailer expectation. Because everyone wants to feel like the hero. Final Fantasy is very much about making you the hero. To have a resolution that sets up the future at the end of X.0, you know, the first patch of the expansion, and then eventually set up a true threat that gets dealt with by the 0.3 patch, and then set up the next expansion with escalating stakes and establishment of dangerous scenarios that are rising up that are going to call for our full attention coming into the next expansion. Not doing that would shock me, and I don't think Final Fantasy fans would take to it in particular. How do you feel about tenacity? Does that answer your question? Alright, hashtag Mrhappy Mondays. Hello, Mr. Happy. Hello. See? Hellos are easy. Hope you're keeping well and safe with everything going on. I haven't asked a question in a while, but I've been having a 14-related thought on my mind recently. Alright, hit me with it. It's pretty safe to say the next job added will most likely be a healer. It's not even safe. They might as well just tell us now. Because it will be no secret. Dude, literally the weekend after Shadowbringers came out, there was, I think it's called Japan Expo in Paris. Yoshi P was on stage at a presentation and asked the crowd, do you want the next expansion to have a healer? And then of course crowd goes, yeah! And then he says, what healer do you guys want? And people just start shouting a bunch of random things. Come on. Like, if you weren't so abundantly aware from the dancer feedback, wherever he's like, I was so surprised everyone thought it was going to be a healer. So we never said that. And then everyone in the crowd shouting for a healer. You know what I mean? Like, come on. It's going to happen. With another healer's added, I personally think it's likely that Astra will have to change how it heals, possibly reworking or removing Diurnal Nocturnal. Completely agree. We've always had access to Regender's shields, but when you think 14, implement more healing styles. If White Mage was based around regen, Scholar focused on shields, and Ash the next healer around different healing styles, such as vampiric healing or reactive healing, similar to skills like XCOD. You know, I don't usually like to encourage kind of random thought speculation about jobs. So you guys know that on this, I often say, what do you think of this questions are really tough for me, because what I think, I guess I just don't hold any value to compared to what is realistic, you know, what we've seen signals for, you know. I like to have discussion based on facts or supporting evidence. But that being said, I'm very much a fan of the idea of Time Mage, which is delayed healing. I actually really like the Stellar Explosion from Astro, and I really think that more proactive healing styles like that could be encouraged more in Final Fantasy XIV. And I also like the Disc Priest means of your damage splashing smaller heals with more direct heals being available as well. Since, especially because DPSing as a healer is something that's become more and more standard. You know, so things like that. I mean, there's totally other ideas. Will they do it? That's the big question. They said they fundamentally needed to fix the way healing worked in 14, or they couldn't add any more jobs. That was one of the main goals in not adding a healer in Shadowbringers. And I don't know that we achieved that. It just feels like the jobs now have more clear identities, but without actually changing anything about how we think of healing in Final Fantasy 14. So, I would prefer a new healing method, which is the core question here at the very end. Not just 2 shield and 2 regen healers. And I don't think they'll go that route. But what route they will go, it's tough. I don't think I have like a solid answer for that. But they gotta land on something that isn't just isn't a copy paste the other 3 healers. That's the bottom line. Hashtag Mrhappy Mondays. Hey Haps, how you doing? Hope you're doing well. I'm doing alright. You doing alright? I'm doing alright. With social distancing and such going on in the world, have you been cooking more? Does heating up frozen chicken tendies count? I've been making cheesy scrambled eggs in the morning. Does that count? You know, maybe heat up a frozen waffle. I wouldn't say I've been cooking more, but I've been buying things that at least are quick to eat at home. And more controlling the portions. I'm a habitual snacker. It's why the only time I've been in the best shape of my life is when I was too poor to afford anything. But nowadays, it's so easy for me living out on my own with my girlfriend, I should say. But not like under the supervision of like being a dependent or being in college or anything like that. It's much easier for me to just say, well, I want this. I'm going to go get this, you know, as long as it's within reason. And so with that in mind, I've gotten really bad at that, you know, but finally I re-quit soda. I took, you know, just before this all started, I took the opportunity to do that by just not doing it. And I've kind of just extended that into other things. You know, I do keep some snacks around, but I keep certain things around, things that I don't want to snack on nearly as much, like pickles or kimchi, you know, pickled foods that have very intense flavor profiles because of the pickling. I'm not going to sit there and eat a whole bag of that or eat a whole jar of pickles. Whereas if you hand me a bag of chips, I might mindlessly just eat the whole thing. But as for cooking, I used to do it a lot more. In college, I did a lot. I would prepare like entire trays of chicken and, you know, get a giant thing of mashed potatoes or, you know, just make a bunch of string beans or some broccoli. That I haven't done in ages. And that hasn't really changed much now. Now it's just a matter of, I get these I have a service that delivers pre-made meals. So basically they do meal prep for you for a week. They're called Freshly. And then you just eat that. And honestly, that saves me money from going out. But now that I'm staying in and eating a lot of food around the house, or just eating things that I've actually shopped for, that's become kind of the more expensive route, but the more convenient route. And then obviously, like I said, you know, I'll do like a scrambled egg, or, you know, I'll make eggs in the morning with toast and butter and all that. Or, you know, I'll maybe like heat up some chicken in the evening. But cook, like really cook, no, I don't think that's actually changed at all. I don't really have a Mr. Happy specialty. When I was 9 years old, I learned the magic that was a pickle and peanut butter sandwich, and that's probably the most creative I've ever gotten with cooking. So I wouldn't say I'm much of the connoisseur. I'm an eater, not a maker. Alright, so for the remainder of this Mondays with Mr. Happy, it seems like it's all spoiler questions. So there's going to be no more spoiler. There's going to be no more text at the bottom in case you haven't clicked away just yet. And from the point that I'm doing this explanation till the outro of the video, there will be the usual spoiler tag that is actually in the outro, or is in the description of the video. So giving you enough time, I'm going to answer the next question now. Alright, spoiler question number 1. Just as one last reminder, if you haven't clicked away, hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Ayo Haps got a few 7 remake spoilers, as if you thought the spoiler questions were going to be about anything else. Come on. Do you think it will be possible to save Aerith in the sequel? If so, do you think it'll require some special hidden action, or do you think it'll just happen as part of the story? So I'm going to say no. Outright. Aerith's death is one of the most iconic scenes in some ways gaming history. And they've said they plan to preserve a lot of those iconic scenes. Now, of course, you make the point that Biggs and Wedge, and possibly Jesse, survived. And Wedge is still up for debate, but come on, you don't off-screen one of the fucking main guys that you've made a point to keep alive versus the original. But Aerith's death is one of the most iconic. And I know all the discussions. I've seen the ending so many fucking times. I don't need it explained to me. I know what we see throughout the final boss fight. I know what we're told by Red. I know all of it. But I wouldn't take anything at face value for a few reasons. One, the people working on it, a lot of them worked on the original Final Fantasy VII, but they've also worked on a great many number of titles that people have had mixed reactions about, including Final Fantasy XIII and Kingdom Hearts. As a franchise, both Final Fantasy and Kingdom Hearts have had mixed reactions in the last few outlets. Whereas Final Fantasy VII Remake, other than the purists who don't want anything changed, a lot of people have been pretty happy with it. I'd say it's generally better received than Final Fantasy 15 and Kingdom Hearts 3. That being said, the developers themselves, while they have that track record, they have said they wanted to preserve most of the iconic scenes. And the one thing that Remake does unanimously amongst people, unless they literally want it to be one-to-one, is it recreates the most iconic scenes from the original in a very, very detailed manner, in a very satisfactory manner. We have some of the most talked about and most questioned scenes since the remake was announced, all being remade, all being there, and all being pretty freaking great. Just because one guy doesn't say that guy are sick does not mean they killed it. They even allude to the sick man and make him part of the freaking story. So, with that, I think she's still dead as fuck. I think that's safe to say. You think the Whispers will repair? I hope not. I don't mind the Whispers. I don't have any issue with what they attempted to accomplish. I think they were just there for the sake of being a big bad in the first game. And I think we've dealt with them. And I could be wrong, but I don't want to, not that I don't want to see them again, I won't miss them. And I don't expect them to be in the rest of it. And you think the Fated timeline is the original game? You think the stories are entirely separate? I don't think anything. I think we're missing information. There's too much that seems like it's being told to us because, you know, that should be our understanding of it. But Aerith, dude, she hiding more. She's not still not telling us the whole deal, is what I firmly believe. Because she has a little, you know, moment with Marlene where Marlene looks at her and then looks back and she goes, shh, don't say anything. And then every time Red goes to open his big lab rat dog mouth, Aerith looks at him and goes, as in, be careful with what you say here. I don't trust anything that's being told to us at face value. Even something Red says I find quite interesting is it our destiny to defy destiny? Because if that were the case, the destiny to defy destiny would cause the events of the original game to take place as intended. Now, I know that kind of makes the whole destiny point redundant, but that's the whole point. There's speculation. There's reason to not just automatically think something. And I think the big thing for this, and probably the other questions I'm going to answer here, is that nothing is set in stone. There's things we don't know. There's things we don't understand yet. And there's also the freedom to make more choices now. We can't say for certain it'll be everything will be there going into the next part. But we also don't know for certain how much this actual first game's final act impacted what they plan to do with the rest of this. So a lot of questions. I feel like when we have part 2, we'll have much more of a grasp of just how much they're trying to keep the same and just how much they're trying to retell the same story. So there's a lot of room for interpretation here, and people should continue to interpret it as they will, but be open to the fact that part 2 could be exactly the same as the first game with the same kind of adjustments we saw in part 1. Stuff like the Honeybee Inn being less of a hostel and more of a, you know, I guess, how do I describe it? Obviously, you have the stage with the dancing, the more cabaret style, but it does have the side rooms as well with some private parties, so... escort service perhaps might be the better way to put it. I don't know. I don't really know how to describe it. I think she's still dead though. Core point, I think she's still dead. Yeah, before I even answer this next spoiler question, there's one that just said, what do you think of the OST? It's a beautiful blend of reorchestrations of the original 7, some very Final Fantasy 13 and Kingdom Hearts-esque tracks, and it's a wonderful mesh of all of them in the OST. But the actual question I'm going to read here. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey, hello, hi. Making sure to say hello as many times as possible. I like it. 7 Remake spoiler question. In my own opinion, I feel like the devs went too far with the whispers. See, I told you it was going to be what all about. And they should have ended at the boss with the train because it makes the Shinra building convoluted. So you mean Motorball ended with the boss at the train. I'm assuming you're referring to Motorball and the I call it the Excite Bike section. Excite Bike section. Jesus. My boss seems like it would have been better as a hard mode special, some sort of alternate ending. Up to the point I enjoyed the changes to the section really made me feel the original had it better. I mean, the original, they leave. And they're like, well, I guess we're leaving. Although you do have the same lines as Sephiroth. I know he's out there, blah, 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 because of everything that happened with President Shinra. I feel they do a much better job of setting up. The Whispers, again, this kind of goes back to the previous question. We don't know how much that story actually impacted it, but they needed to make this feel like it was like the story was totally conclusive. Or there was at least a plot line or story that was totally concluded in this first part. I think that's the Whispers. I think they were just added as a part 1 big bad to help us further establish the level of threat that Sephiroth actually has. And I have no issue with them. I actually think there's some pretty interesting theories going on about there, but I think the common theory is that the Whispers we encounter are the future timeline versions of Cloud, Tifa, and Barret, and they eventually form Bahamut, and then the future version of Sephiroth, the Whispers summon, is not the Sephiroth that we come to know at the Edge of Creation, but the one we actually battle is the one from the future that successfully summons Meteor, hence why when the Whispers circle around, he just goes, well, I guess it's time to summon Meteor right now. So there's all sorts of different theories about that last part. I think the Whisper's role wasn't so much unnecessary. I could have lived without it, but if it's just for the sake of giving a big bad and a big finale to a game that I otherwise love, I'm perfectly okay with that. I get this next one is less of a spoiler question. I should have included it. We'll just include it because it's got 7 Remake, and I don't want people feeling afraid of hearing those words, and I'm going to click away from the video because they don't want spoilers. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hello, Mr. Haps. I hope you're doing well. Same to you. Be safe, be happy, be healthy, be hygiene. With the remake of 7 well underway, do you think they would do the same with 8 and 9? While I know that 7 was more popular, a lot of people still love 8 and 9. 9 is my personal favorite, and I would pre-order it in a heartbeat. I think 8 and 6 are up for debate. I don't think 9 is. 9... So 9 didn't do inherently worse because it was a worse Final Fantasy. It's not one of my favorites for a great many number of reasons. But it was just towards the end of the PlayStation 1 era. Final Fantasy VIII's success, while a lot of people have very fond memories of it, and a lot of people do love it, and that's fine. It's, again, not a favorite of mine, but it is the first Final Fantasy I own, so there's a little bit of a soft spot for it. I think 8's story is people would more demand to be retold, and 8 also kind of rode the success of 7 more. By the time 9 rolled around, it only really did that much worse than 8, and it didn't do that much worse because the hype from 7 carried over to the sales of 8, which then trailed off as 9 came out, and then 10 kind of reignited it, with still riding a little bit off of 7's name, but also being the first PlayStation 2 Final Fantasy game. I think 6 and 8, and they've actually named those two as other games they'd like to remake, are the biggest candidates. I'd actually also like a Final Fantasy 1 remake. Yeah, I think Final Fantasy 1 has room to be a much more open-ended experience, something that doesn't feel as maybe shoehorned of an open world as Final Fantasy 15 did, for example, because it's a way more D&D or even old-school Dragon Quest style story and game. And I think they could play to that, and I think there's room to actually have a pretty unique experience with the original Final Fantasy if it were to be fully remade. But I think 6 and 8 are the big candidates, and unfortunately, I don't think 9 would be one of them. All right, it's going to be the last spoiler question I take, because... Actually, I think it is the last spoiler question. There's some other questions in here, but I see some people have actually taken to answering the comment section with some pretty good answers that I don't have that much to add to. So it's kind of hard for me to just repeat what those answers actually say. So final 7 Remake spoiler questions. Hey, Halves, how you doing? 7 Remake spoilers ahead. There we go. So I need to make sure I didn't misinterpret what I saw at the end of 7 Remake. It seems we saw Zack did not die where he did in the original story, and that he survived and brought Cloud to Midgar. If that is the case, then what do you think the odds are of us running into him in the next game? So this is a big point of discussion. Zack is alive in a different timeline, which is actually almost a worse answer than me just saying yes. One thing that's established very immediately is that we are never given the opportunity to learn who Zack is. They also probably weren't going to kill him in this game no matter what, because if he dies, it's too much to tell about Cloud when we don't really know everything about Cloud yet. All of those events kind of need to come together. We need to see Cloud's assimilation of Zack's personality through the Jenova cells. That's like a big thing that's going to happen later. And no matter what, as soon as I saw him, like, he's not dying here. I didn't think we were going to see a scene of him living, though. A big thing is a bag of chips that flies by during that to establish to you that this is not the same Midgar. This is not the same world. The stamp, which is the dog that Shinra uses as its mouthpiece, essentially, as its recruitment, as its cute little way of saying, oh, look, we're Shinra military. And of course, for propaganda for the Wutai War. Probably the real reason, the thing I should have led with, is the stamp design is different. And keep in mind that between the end of Crisis Core, which is where Zack originally dies, and Final Fantasy VII, where Cloud is doing the bombing run, is in a span of, I think, less than half a year. So it's not like you could say, oh, maybe that was like their design for stamp years and years ago. It's too recent in time. So the establishment there is that is a separate timeline where maybe Zack got a happy ending. Maybe he actually got to live. Now, I'm still all for that still being our timeline. The most commonly accepted theory is that Zack is currently alive in our timeline. And that, yeah, that Stamp's design was just different. You know, it's a bag of chips. Maybe they made him cuter for the bag of chips. Maybe he's Stamp Jr. Who knows, right? And I think that's especially exacerbated with the scene where we see him walking Cloud to Midgar after being injured as much as he has been. I think they just kept his death scene from us, and that he beat those Shinra troops. But let's be real here. Even if he beat those Shinra troops, that doesn't mean Shinra leaves him alone. He's still going to be dead as shit as soon as he gets anywhere near Midgar. Not like, well, this is our last try. After that, he gets to go. He may have a way more dramatic death in Final Fantasy VII Remake when we actually get to see it going forward into the future. I think the biggest takeaway is when Zack is walking Cloud and Cloud is walking the opposite way. Aerith said that when they stepped through the portal, they would essentially meet Destiny's Crossroads, which was supposed to be a sign that if we win, then we're changing fate, we're changing the future. You know, nothing's written in stone, or if we lose, this is what our fated future is actually going to be. However, seeing Cloud and Zack walk past each other in what we could assume are separate timelines and or separate times in the current timeline is a crossroad of destiny in itself. It's where Zack's journey ended and where Cloud's journey began when he assimilated Zack's personality, and where his actual journey is going to take him now as he ventures out into the world to find Sephiroth and deal with that threat along with his teammates. So there's a lot of interpretation we had, and it's why I don't really dislike the way they decided to end 7 Remake. I know some people say it's a little too Kingdom Heartsy, you know, power of friendship, everyone's gonna live, no one's ever really dead, yada yada yada. But at least with this is more reminiscent of early Kingdom Hearts, where it wasn't so complicated, it wasn't so complex. Unfortunately, throwing time into it is the big question mark. That's the big thing people are afraid of, and I think that's well within reason. I think Zack's dead in our timeline. We're seeing a scene of him from an alternate timeline where he got his happy ending, and that he's still dead. And we're not, if we do see him, it's going to be the same way Cloud sees him in like Advent Children, where his Jenova cells have taken on Zack's personality, and he can kind of start to communicate with Zack internally. Like, he still hears his voice, and he still talks to him, he still peps him up. I wouldn't be surprised to have something more akin to that. Stuff that we see in Advent Children. But, no, I think he's dead as fuck. And I know, oh, but Biggs is alive, Jesse may be alive, Wedge may be alive. That's fine. I think they just got some A-list actors, and they're like, well, listen, we need to have them have a really emotional scene, but you know what? They're not done yet. We got bigger roles for them in the future. All right, and that's the end of the spoiler section. We are now in the outro, and thank you everyone for watching and asking episodes for this week's episode of Mondays with Mr. Happy. If you had a question and I didn't get to it, there were definitely a few I didn't get to. Again, there were some questions that were answered in the comment section, like people actually provided answers, and I actually didn't have much to add for some of those. And I think there are some that just for time, I think there's like 1 or 2 time-wise that I didn't get to, or they didn't have like an actual question. They were just like proposing thoughts. So there wasn't like a question to answer. So I prioritized things that were like full-blown questions. So yeah, that's how we went through with those last ones. But if you have a question, ask it in the comment section below for next week's episode of Mondays with Mr. Happy. Again, we have a bunch of things coming up this coming week. Trials of Mana remake. We have a couple of Final Fantasy VII pieces, including a spoiler cast on TVG. We have our live letter for Final Fantasy XIV. We'll have a State of the Realm based on that live letter next week, and an overview video for you later this week. But anyway, that's gonna be a wrap for me. Thanks everyone for watching. I will see you all in the next one, and until then, take care.